Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi. How are you?
Thank you. Okay. So we were going to go to review the Shulchan Aruch that we did yesterday, because there are some important points over there that need to be discussed. So let's see that. It actually is practical also for us, in some way. So let's look at that. It says like this. Sif Zayin. This is the last one of the chapter. Tanur shemanichim bo achamin, right? So what happened? You got an oven and you're putting cholent in there, or your whatever you got, right? The word chamin means like hot dish. So whatever hot dish you're having, right, doesn't really matter what it is. So you got your hot dish there, and you close the oven. You put like a board, right, to seal it, and you also plaster it up, so it's nice and sealed well. So the question is now: are you allowed to open that seal and remove the challenge, right, and serve? This is the question. Why are we asking this question? Because the question of demolition, right? Demolishing the seal. So the answer is yes, you are allowed to. What's the reason why? Because it's temporary, right? All this building and demolition is temporary. So therefore, there's no prohibition. By the way, this also affects another issue. This is what I wanted to also mention. When it comes to electricity, right? The Chazon Ish said that there's also a problem of building with electricity, which means that you're building a circuit. So the poskim came out, and against the Chazon Ish, when it comes to this, and they said no, it's not true. Why? So he used the same reasoning as we have here, right? Which is the Gemara says in Masechet Betzah, Lamed Bet Amud Bet, that temporary building is not called building. So even if you're building the circuit, right, a half hour later you're going to shut it down. You can open it up again. So therefore, that's not really called building; it's temporary. So therefore, they say that there's no prohibition with building when it comes to electricity. There's other issues that have to be dealt with as well, but when it comes to that, right, it's a non-starter. These rabbis say. That's one thing. So same thing as here as well. Since it's temporary, you're allowed to demolish. You open, you close, you open, you close. So that's what it says here. You can open it and close it too, right? You can close it again. Why? It's temporary, right? You can open again, right? So what's the difference does it make? That's the whole thing. Okay, fine. So, but then comes right Shulchan Aruch and says, "V'im yesh bo gehalim lo chashot." So it says, if you have here burning coals in the oven, right? Mutar l'idei yehudi. So then you can have to tell a goy to do it. You can't do it yourself. So we said, right? What's the reason for that? Because you're going to extinguish the coals by closing the door. And also ignite it when you open it. So therefore, tell the goy to do it. So if we're telling you here to tell the goy to do it, that means the prohibition is only rabbinical. Because if it was from the Torah, you cannot tell a goy to do it. So therefore, it's rabbinical, this whole thing. So now let's look at the Mishnah Berurah here for a second, see what he says about that. So Mishnah Berurah says a nice thing over here, which is that you're not allowed to close the door, by yourself. You got to get a goy to do it. So why is that? Because when you close the door, you're extinguishing the coals. And even though, right, he doesn't intend to do that. That's not his intention. But the thing is, since it's inevitable, it must happen. It must happen. So therefore, it's still prohibited. So now it says Mishnah Berurah, right? A good point. When it comes to telling a goy, about we're not so particular about that regarding this prohibition. So what do you see from there? That this prohibition is only rabbinical, because if it was from the Torah, we wouldn't allow even a goy to do it. So why is it rabbinical? Because it's not your intention. Then says Mishnah Berurah another important thing, which is that if you don't close it altogether, all the way, then even a Jew could do it. So why is that? Because if you don't close it all the way, it won't really get extinguished. There's still enough air there, to keep the coals burning. So now what I wanted to say is like this, right? You know what? I'm going to continue with the Mishnah Berurah because there's some important stuff here. So it says, Katam Magen Avraham, right? It says in Magen Avraham, Dafka keshemanicho harbe patuach. That's only if he, leaves it open like a lot. He doesn't, it's not even close to being closed altogether. But it says if you just leave it a little bit open, it says then we should forbid this, mishum mav'ir, because you're burning, you're causing the coals to burn more, igniting them. You're igniting the coals. Why is that? The teva haruach liot mapiach, because the wind, right? When you close the door, it actually caused the coals to go up. נקב קטן, אדם לפתוח מעביר יותר התנור, מאלו היה פתוח לגמרי. So he gives you another problem, right? Which is that, you're also igniting the coals as well, because of the wind which comes from, right, closing the door. That's one thing he brings over here. Then he brings another point, which is, right, from the Eli Araba. כתב אלי הרבה, דמקום דחק מותר ישראל לסתום התנור. So he says, you know what? In a pressing case, even the Jew can close the door. Even if there is coals in there. Why? We're going to rely on the opinion of Tumat Adeshin, that he's lenient regarding this. So he holds, right, that it's not really inevitable that it's going to extinguish the coals. By way of closing it. So it's as if the fire is burning there inside. So then, even Tumat Adeshin is forbidden. Because closing it now will cause the fire to be extinguished quickly. So says Mishnah Berurah, the Veda, the calls there, this is only regarding, he says you should know, this is only regarding closing the oven. But what about opening? What about that? So he says then, right, it's a sure thing, it's inevitable that the coals will be extinguished by closing it. Sorry, I think I read it wrong. One more time. Right. So he says, but opening it is for everybody agrees that you cannot open it by way of a Jew. If you know there's coals and they're burning, if it's not sealed with the plaster, as we said. Why? Because then the wind, right, will ignite the coals. Okay, this Mishnah Berurah is very important. A lot of important things here going on. So let's go back to Shulchan Aruch for a second. So just to recap, right, what we just said, that closing the oven, there is a rabbinic prohibition. And therefore, opening it also, is a rabbinic prohibition. So how is that? Because when he opens it, he makes it burn brighter and makes it burn stronger. So he's igniting the flame there, igniting the fire. But it's rabbinical, the prohibition. Why is that? Because that's not his intention. So says Mishnah Berurah regarding that, everybody agrees, that opening the oven is a problem. If there's coals in there. So now, right, this is the main thing I wanted to discuss, which is, what about our ovens, right? Which are, in America, mostly gas ovens, right? Some are also electric. Question is, with the gas oven, right? If you open the door, are you making the flame stronger? Just like with the coals? What do you say about that? Not really sure about that, but anyway, I'm going to read the Ramah here. ויש מחמירים שלא לסתור סתימת התנור רתוח בתית על ידי ישראל. So it says there's an opinion which is stringent not to open the oven, which is, because of demolition. So if you can do it by way of a goy, don't do it yourself. That's what it says. Also, if it's possible to do by way of Israel Katan, if you can do it with child. Lo yaseh Israel Gadol, so then you shouldn't do it by way of an adult. So the child is the better option, right? Than the adult. If it's not possible, then a gadol can do it, right? Somebody who's a bit big. By doing shinu, as we said, right? Oh, there you go. Do shinui. Right? So that's the custom, he says, right? Kumat Adeshan says this. And we did see this in the Bet Yosef, if I'm not mistaken. So then he goes on, Raman, so it says, it seems to me that which it's allowed, right, to close the oven, right, again, to seal it up again. So that's only in the daytime where all the pots are totally cooked. All the dishes are totally cooked. But he says when it comes to the night, close to when you insulate it, there's still a doubt at that point. Perhaps some of the dishes are not totally cooked. Asur listom tanur, and you're not allowed to seal up the oven. The gorem bishul, because now you're causing the cooking. Like it says in chapter 257, Seif Daled. אפילו על ידי אינו יהודי אסור. So it says this is forbidden even by way of a non-Jew. Why? Because here you're actually cooking, from the Torah. So therefore, you cannot do a non-Jew to do say you cannot tell a non-Jew to do it either. Emotion like it says over here in this chapter. So now, right, I ask another question here, which is if you have an electric oven with heating elements, like toaster oven kind of thing. In Israel, most of the ovens are electric. You barely have any gas ovens in Israel. Nothing. So if that's the case, is there still a problem to open and close the door regarding the heating element? Is it making it burn brighter or not? So those two questions, regarding a gas oven or a electric oven, I still don't know for sure, right? If it's the same thing as coals, I'm not really sure about that. So perhaps what we should do is look in the Yokut Yosef and see, maybe he has something about this regarding the issue with the ovens. Because, the Mishnah Berurah, right, he didn't see, the kind of ovens that we have today, right? He didn't see the gas oven. He didn't see the electric oven. He didn't have that stuff. He just had, coals like everybody else, like the good old days. So we can't really refer to him, for this question. So let's go to Yokut Yosef for a second. I'm going to bring it up and see what we got there. Okay. So yeah, he does deal with this issue, but he's not talking about gas ovens, and the reason is because they don't have them in Israel. And that's why I don't talk about it. But when it comes to electric, he says that it's possible to be lenient with this. So what does that mean? To open the door or close the door, it's not really going to cause the heating element to burn brighter or whatever, to dim by opening and closing the door. But then afterwards, he says that if you have a kind of oven, right, which when you open the door, the flame goes up, the fire goes up, you should not use this oven because you cannot open it. So, I mean, we're on the right track. What I mean to say is that, we got the right concepts here, that everything is correct. The only question I really have, I'm not really sure about is when you open a gas oven, does it make the flame burn brighter or not?
Yes.
It does, right? How do you know that?
So the pilot or whatever light is actually causing the flame to keep the oven hot. When you open it's keeping it at a certain level, and then when you open the oven door and it lets air in, then it has to increase the flame to keep it at that temperature.
Yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying, but you're talking about a thermostat, right?
Well, I mean, if you set the oven to be at 350 or whatever, and you
Yeah.
open the oven, it lets the warm air out and the
Yeah,
temperature will go
I
down.
understand what you're saying. I got that.
Okay.
But here's the thing, right? You have to understand one thing.
Okay.
That when it works like the way you described, there's a delay there. It doesn't happen right away.
Okay. So, all right, let me
It's
give
called
another.
groma.
If you're not talking about that, if you're talking about just the flame itself, does the flame itself go up anytime you
That
introduce?
was my question. Exactly. Now you got it. Now you got it.
Anytime you introduce oxygen into a system, you're going to increase the flame. You're going to increase the
I
combustion.
agree with you 100%.
Okay. So what am I missing?
Yeah. So, but honestly, like just from experience, in my life, I don't know. I'm not really sure about this, 100%. I don't really see anything, going up or down when I open the oven or close the oven. It's not something which is like visible to the eye.
Right. So let's
right?
imagine for a minute that you had a fire in the oven. What would be the first thing you'd do?
Put it
Something.
out.
What are you going to do?
Turn off the gas, right? Turn off the gas.
You could turn off the gas, okay. But to put the fire out, you're going to close the oven to deprive it of oxygen, right?
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, okay.
Okay. So the opposite would also, I would think, well, first of all, I would think that. But secondly, I can see the flame in my oven. I don't know if you can see the flame in yours.
You do. You do? You do. Okay, so what do you see?
When I open the oven, I can hear it go click, click, and you can see the flame going higher.
Oh boy. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, if that's the case, right? If that's the case, that it does go higher, then for sure it's forbidden to do so.
Well, I wouldn't use the oven during Shabbat anyway.
Right, but that's our discussion, right?
Right.
So that's if what you're saying is right, and it does sound right, what you're saying, it does sound right. I cannot argue with that. Nothing to argue about. So if that's the case, then you have a problem. You can't open the door of the oven.
So, okay,
Yeah.
but if I've left something in there just to stay warm with the residual heat and the oven's not on, then it shouldn't.
That's something else. If it's off, right? Of course, yes.
Right, but I would not leave a gas oven on during Shabbat. That would be dangerous.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The oven that they're talking about here is not the same ovens that we use.
They're using coals.
They're using coals. That's different.
Yeah. That's what it is.
That's not a gas that's going through pipes.
No, no, no. It's just your garden variety coals, charcoals.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, so
Yeah.
you had like
Yeah.
a
Okay.
charcoal
So yeah,
barbecue.
I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. I'm listening to you.
Okay. If you had like a charcoal barbecue, right? And
Yes.
it's on fire, whatever. If you had the lid on it and you take the lid off, does that same principle would apply, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I just I don't have one with a lid, but
You you get the disposable ones.
yeah, no, I bought actually one which is not disposable, but it doesn't have a lid.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. All right. So anyway, right, I think that again, right, because I get this question asked all the time by people. People call me and they say, "Rabbi, can I, put stuff in the oven, and then take it out on Shabbat? You know what I mean? To keep it hot there." So the answer is, if there's a flame going on and you're opening the door, you got a problem. Apparently, right? That's what it is. Okay. All right. That's very interesting. What can I tell you? And then he adds here the Akut Yosef, another thing, which is that, returning the food into the oven, right, after you served it is even worse because there it looks like you're cooking. So you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't return it, right, back into the oven. Unless, right, we have something, some way to allow this. There are certain conditions which would allow it. I'm not going to get into it now, right? Well, I guess maybe we should get into it. What would allow that? We already mentioned one thing, right? Which is that it's not hot enough anymore to cook, right? The oven. If it's not hot enough to cook, that means you could put it back. Or the dish is like, still too hot, right, to touch. So there also you could put it back. So there are certain cases where you can put it back. But if the oven is just running, and it's hot, there's no way to put it back unless the dish is hot. Okay. So that's what we got. All right, I guess we covered that pretty good. Not too bad. I have this like desire right now, like this curiosity to like look on Google, about this issue, like to see what they say about that. But I think I have to say, what I think what you said is right. And I'm not really arguing with that. Just I'm curious, maybe there's something that that we don't know. Maybe there's something we're missing. I don't know. Let me ask you another question, which is, how is it, right, with the oven, that the flame burns when it's closed? There's no oxygen there. You understand my point? You get where I'm going here? How does the flame burn in there? It burns very well. But there's no oxygen there. No, well, how does it burn? How do you have a flame going in an oven for 2-3 hours? Right? Let's say you're baking something, right? You're baking a roast. How does it go for 2-3 hours without any oxygen? You see why I'm asking this question? Because what I'm theorizing possibly, is that maybe it has some other oxygen source in there. There is some air source going on in there. Am I right or wrong? It's just hard to imagine, how it just goes like that without any air for 2, 3 hours. How does that happen? That's exactly why I want to look into it a little bit more, about this in the way these ovens work. I don't know how they work really, honestly. Because you know what it is, right? That these ovens that we use, there's a compartment, where the flame is. It's like separate from the baking area. So that area where the flame is, doesn't it have its own oxygen source? How is it burning? Because you know what it is, right? That the ovens that we're talking about here in the Shulchan Aruch, these ovens, you close them, you plaster them. They're like hermetically closed, They're really tight. They're airtight. That's what it is. The question is, are our ovens airtight like that? Or maybe they have a source of oxygen. Maybe there's some air getting in there somewhere. So what I'm trying to say is like this, right? If that's true, what I'm saying, if that's true, then maybe, when you open the door, it doesn't really affect it because there's enough oxygen as it is. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a little bit doubtful about that. Anyway, I'll go back to the to Bet Yosef Shulchan Aruch. We'll leave the Yalkut Yosef now. So, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to cut it here because we have some circumstances going on and we need to cut it. So, Bezat Hashem, we will continue next time. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch, and Chodesh Tov. All the best.